We are joined today by Dr. Maja Stanojeciv-Andre. Maja is originally trained as a medical doctor and a psychiatrist and has been practicing as an executive leadership coach and OD consultant for more than 20 years. She has founded the Institute for Developmental Coaching and is a pioneer of applying adult developmental theories in the coaching and leadership practices. I'll hand it over to you, Maja.
Thank you, Ray. And first of all, thank you really for inviting me to be part of this conference. It is a great honor and privilege to be among all the other speakers that will be speaking on these 2 days. So what I will be doing today, I will be speaking basically one to the context of the times that we are living in today, which happens to be the theme of this conference as well, the workplace coaching in the VUCA time. And I'm also going to talk for that particular reason why being more aware and actually making the adult development conversation and in my particular lineage, ego development stages and how it impacts our organizational way of working with each other, as well in the world of coaching, much more mainstream conversation these days. So, we are all aware that we live in unprecedented times, that today you do not have to actually explain what a VUCA means, that people are very familiar with this volatility and uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. But when we started teaching this about 15 years ago, you had to really go and explain, and people even plus 2-3 years ago would argue, is it really so? Is it really changing? But today, I think no one will argue anymore to see that we have unprecedented increase in speed of change, and our interconnectedness and globalization and interdependence has increased tremendously. And if anything, what we can be grateful to for the COVID pandemic is that it made this interdependence and interconnectedness that exists in this world so palpable and so close to our skin and to the bone these days. So for that reason, I believe that we actually need to get much better in navigating this territory with more updated maps, because the time that we used to live and all the theories and practices and way of organizing and being in the world was a perfect fit for the times of the past. Yet today, the times in which we live and what is coming, actually the practices and the theories that we have and the way how we organize ourselves is actually not really working anymore. So at a time that we have a very stable and not as fast changing the world that you could really predict and measure and control, having the practices that we had was working fine, and having a cultures that were more of that command and control and independent achievement way of working was working fine. But today, with this increase in interdependence and this VUCA world being so prominent, the waves of adaptive challenges that we are experiencing really need a different way of being in the world and different way of organizing ourselves, and therefore different ways of how we do coaching as well in our workplaces. So what I would like to suggest, and I think that many of us do agree, that as soon as there is increase in complexity, in change and volatility, that actually rather than command and control, collaboration and innovation and agility is what is called forth. And I don't know for how long, it has been quite a few years that we have heard that, most important capabilities that we need to develop in our leaders and in our workplaces is ability to innovate, to be agile, and to collaborate. Now, that is much easier said than done. To just ask people to do that is actually what sometimes becomes very confusing, because if you want to, get a job, of course, what you're going to say that, I love innovation, I love collaboration. And then, when tire hit the road, we have a lot of difficulties with that. So collaboration is quite a high capacity activity, so to speak, and that not everyone has the capacity for the good quality collaboration. And that is exactly the reason why we actually need to, first of all, learn what are the differences between capabilities and capacities, and also what are the ways that we can learn and develop that are more what we call the vertical learning and development rather than horizontal learning and development. So some of you are very familiar with the Santiago theory of cognition by Umberto Maturana and Francis Varela. And what it basically says in a very simplified form is that human beings do not see the reality as it is, that human beings create their reality. And this is what we call in ego development theories is that the constructive nature of reality. And that major difficulties that we have in our social systems is that sometimes we forget that, or we are not even aware of that. We are not aware that actually each individual will experience a very different reality, that we do not see the world as it is, that we can see and perceive the world that we can. So we often hear that we don't see the world as it is, that we see the world as we are. So what ego stages of development is basically exploring how this ability of us to see, understand, comprehend, and engage with others is changing over time, and not just a linear time, but it is possible to actually grow and evolve in that vertical manner, to expand our capacity of mind, heart, and action by being able to see more, to comprehend more, and therefore have more choices into what do we choose to do in a particular situation. So that is on one side, and on the other, in terms of creating a better collaborative practices, it's really allowing people to have time to share their perspective, to have time for reflection, first of all, on ourselves, to see what am I really seeing, thinking, and feeling, and how am I impacting my environment, and also seeing and thinking and feeling how those around me and my environment is impacting me, and how does that interaction is basically what it is creating. So I would like to kind of, from the experience that I have seen, that we don't take enough time in our companies to do so. that some of the transformational changes that we are talking about is kind of this digital transformation, and looking how do we transform our organizations by having more and more tech savvy and digitalized world. And in some way, what we have forgotten is that we might become a very savvy and good in understanding and developing the technical and the complexity of the digital world, but actually we're still lagging hugely behind in understanding the complexity and the inner world, so that we both individually and collectively need to make significant shifts in changing that. So again, because the world is the way that it is like now, in terms of the increased interdependence and interconnectedness, to the world of leadership and coaching has been mostly individually based. And a lot of our leadership practices have been, and coaching practices have been at the individual, which is very important, that personal mastery and developing individual is incredibly important. But that actually we live in a time that no one individual can ever really see, comprehend, understand, and engage with the challenges and problems that we are facing today. And that what we really need is we need to start developing and really honing that collective leadership capacities and capabilities. So in order to do that, we need to therefore involve both our individual and our organizations, our individual leadership practices and our organizational leadership practices. The good and the bad news of adaptive challenges that we are all facing in now is that the bad news first is it feels awful to be faced that the challenges that we are facing are in some way bigger and more challenging than our current capacities. Feels very uncomfortable. But on the other hand, the good part of that is that has been a driving force of evolution and evolutionary change forever and ever. That as the humans interact with their environment, that they every now and then come across something that is new and unprecedented, and they have to evolve in order to be able to meet the current challenge. So the good news in all of this is that it is probably going to help us evolve. And that, you know, it's very often used, the Albert Einstein quote, that the problems that we are facing today cannot be solved from the same level of thinking than it has been the thinking that it has created it. And in some way, we are now at the place in which we are experiencing the problems that our growth orientation, that it has been for so many years now, has now, rather than being healthy growth, has become kind of a cancer. And we have to find a way how to now manage uncontrolled and unfettered consequences of the growth and expansion that has been pursued over the last few decades. Well, this presentation very much reflects the time in which we live. Something unpredictable has happened and I had to make a pause, and I'm now coming back for the second part of this presentation. So what I would like to talk about now and spend a little bit more time at actually focusing on what is leadership maturity framework, this particular adult development theory, about leadership maturity profile and the tool that theory is associated with that actually measuring these stages of development. And the third, what is leadership maturity developmental coaching, and how does it differ, and in what ways is similar with the general coaching that we are usually informed by. So first of all, the leadership maturity framework is the theory that basically developed by Jane Levenger in 60s and 70s. And it's very much a ground-up theory that from developing the Washington University sentence completion test and collecting all these data through the years, the theory has formed itself and described the stages of development as the data has been collected. And since then, over these many decades, it has been again revisited, reframed, and developed with a bit more granularity, with a little bit more detail as we gather more and more data to differentiate further, especially upon the later stages of development rather than earlier stages of development. And also that my relationship with this theory started in 2005 when I met with Suzanne Cook-Reuter in Boulder in Colorado. And then we started together working in bringing this body of work to Australia and facilitating leadership maturity framework and developmental coaching intensive from about 2006 and 2014 together. And then since then, I have continued teaching and accrediting coaches and consultants in Australia and in Asia. So many other contributors have added their contribution to the theory itself, including Bill Tobert, that some of you may have heard of, that he was the first one to actually see how this can be applied outside of the developmental psychology and only research field, how this can be actually applied to the field of leadership and management and in a context of our workplaces. So the beauty of this theory is very much that it is an open and dynamic system itself, so that as we get more and more data as the world and we change, that it is open enough that it can be reframed and more accurately in a way describe what is the human experience. So a leadership maturity profile, which is the tool associated with the framework, is there to actually measure from the objective perspective what are the stages of development that leaders go through. And from that, we can extrapolate what are the stages of development that actually organizational teams and organizations go through, that it can actually lend itself to that as well. The leadership maturity profile is currently the most rigorously validated and most reliable stage assessment tool that is available. And there are other tools that are now being used to measure, but this is the core tool from which others have in a way arisen as well. And it is semi-projective sentence completion test that people will, through language, project what they are thinking and feeling, what they are able to see, how they're processing that, what is the level of complexity that they are able to see and express, and many other factors that it measures, that is very helpful both for the assessment of person's capacity, but also in a coaching, that it can actually highlight what are the issues that and what is the meaning making that this person is currently operating at, and that can help to really target the coaching to that specific meaning-making stage that client is at. So the difference in a way between developmental coaching and other coaching practices is that it really has a span of approaches that is catering to both earlier stages and the later stages, because the coaching itself as an industry has arisen from one particular stage, which is the stage we call the achiever stage. So it's mostly associated with, assessing where we are, where we would like to go, what are some of the goals that we would like to achieve, and how are we going to get there. And that's kind of the core staple center piece of the coaching industry. But also that there are many stages before that stage, and there are many stages after that stage, so that the coach can have an ability to recognize and also to adjust its coaching style and its variety of tools to optimally match what is the person's ego stage of maturity, and what is the most likely way in this person, how this person will make sense and meaning of its environment and on its challenges. And then we can actually really help them to develop in a way that is either developing within the stage, so growing horizontally within the stage, or if they are in these transitional places, how do we, through support and challenge, help them make this transformational shift? The reason why a lot of this has gained a lot of interest and popularity lately is because we really are in these times, as I spoke about earlier, that the way how we thought and made meaning and therefore acted upon is not meeting the challenges that we are facing. So it helps us how to the structure and architect developmental plan and a path both for individual and organization, so that it can grow and evolve in these predictable stages that we are aware of, towards more capacity and more functional fit with the challenges the person has. Now, this theory is actually looking at the ego stages of development, not just cognition, or decision making, or just emotion, but actually integration of our thinking, our being, our emotional world, and our actions that come that are informed by the way how we think and feel. So often it is called the action logics rather than just ego stages. And another thing that is important to mention is that, we often liken ego that is like internal operating system, is something that actually helps us to metabolize, to gather all this information from outside and from inside of ourselves, make sense of that, and then act upon. And that depending what is the capacity or what is the stage of capacity of this internal operating system, will be capable or not so to meet and see and therefore process the complexity that we are now being faced with, as well as what is the emotional capacity of this person to see and feel and assess and empathize with its environment and the people that is surrounded by, so that it can more adequately meet and engage with. And especially when it comes to collaboration, being able to see, hear, and feel others and be with others in a strong and robust way, to be able then to harness all these different perspectives and way of seeing and thinking, and all these different strengths and capacities that we as a collective have, requires a particular developmental stage for a leader to be on in order to be able to do that. So what is not like this operating system that we see in the computer, which is, from the DOS, that was the most basic to, as it evolves to Windows, I've got no idea what it is now, probably 10 or 12, that from stage to stage, once we develop to the next operating system, we kind of disregard the earlier ones. In this case, we actually don't disregard the earlier stages. That earlier stages still stay very much the part of our being and thinking and acting. And we do what is called, transcending and including the earlier stages. So they don't become obsolete. They still very much inform us. And that also what we need to be now able to do is to develop not just individual, but actually our organizational way of structuring and organizing and operating that actually can create place and space for people at all different stages of development, but because we will all be forever going through all of these stages, and forever there will be need and place for all of these different stages of development. But what we need is the leadership that can actually be one aware of that, and then create the organization that can create the optimal match with people where they are at their best, so that people don't feel either over their head because it's just way too much, or they also don't feel bored and disinterested because the level where they are, they're not feeling stretched and challenged enough, so that we can actually really assess and work with people at their best and what are their strengths, and then how together they can optimize each other performance, so that the collective leadership and organization I'm talking about are the ones that are actually, rather than optimizing individual performance, are looking really how do we optimize our organizational, the holistic performance through being able to organize and distribute the roles and responsibilities that are the best match with a person's stage of development. So I think that I have probably spoken a lot already, and I'm trying to see somewhere what is the time that I have. And I believe that probably whatever it is, it can be a good time to stop now. I thank you again for listening, and maybe apologize for being maybe a little bit too complex or rambling at time, because this is something that I usually do over the 5 or 6 days. So when I have a half an hour, that's not that easy for me to actually find in a succinct way how to bring what is the most important. But I thank you for listening, and I hope that you will find it useful in some way. Thank you and goodbye.